The Galactic Academy of Unity had finally settled into a fragile calm. Students returned to their lessons and the air of fear had lessened. The mercenaries had been captured. Corin was under careful supervision and the Academy systems had been repaired. Yet Elias Ward didn't relax. Sitting at his usual desk in the back corner, he watched the room with calm eyes. He knew the real threat was still out there, the one who had orchestrated everything. Someone far more skilled, patient, and dangerous than any mercenary. The other students were unaware. They laughed, discussed lessons, and shared snacks, believing the danger had passed. Lyra sat beside him, trying to focus on her studies, but her eyes often flicked nervously toward Elias. "Do you think they're really gone?" she whispered. Elias leaned back in his chair, expression calm. "Not forever. They're clever. But clever isn't always faster than experience." She frowned. "I don't understand." Elias smiled faintly. "You'll understand when you face danger yourself. Humans from Earth, we survive because we control our fear, not because we ignore it." Later that day, a low hum echoed through the hallways. It was subtle, almost unnoticed, but Elias caught it immediately. It was not the Academy AI, nor the usual vibrations of engines. Something moved in the shadows. He rose quietly, motioning for Lyra to stay put. She nodded, feathers ruffling nervously. Elias moved through the corridors, silent and focused. Ahead he saw a flicker of movement, fast, controlled, and precise. The figure was cloaked in black, moving toward the upper levels of the academy. The final confrontation had begun. The figure entered the main learning hall, where several students were still working on holographic projects. The killer's eyes scanned the room, seeking a target. Elias stepped into the open, his posture calm, unshaken. The figure froze. "You again?" The voice hissed, deep and sharp. "I'm here to stop you," Elias said, voice steady. "Leave peacefully and no one gets hurt." The killer laughed, a low, threatening sound. "You think you can stop me? I've outsmarted the Academy's AI, the guards, and everyone else. You're just a human." Elias smiled faintly. "Just a human who grew up on a death world." "You should know what that means," the figure's eyes narrowed. "I've fought humans before. They always panic. They always fail. Not all humans," Elias said calmly. "Some survive." Without warning, the killer lunged. His movements were precise, almost mechanical, aimed to incapacitate. Elias didn't flinch. His body reacted naturally, trained by instinct and experience. He sidestepped, using the attacker's momentum to redirect him into a pillar. Sparks flew as the metal collided with the floor. The students screamed, ducking behind tables. Lyra pressed herself against the wall, watching every motion with wide eyes. Elias didn't strike blindly. Every move was calculated. A step forward, a pivot, a push or pull, always controlled. The killer swung again, faster, stronger, expecting fear, but Elias's calmness was like a shield. "You're faster than the others," the killer hissed. "But speed isn't everything." Elias didn't respond verbally. Instead, he moved with precision, blocking a strike, redirecting force, and finally disarming the figure by twisting his weapon away. The fight escalated. The killer lunged, rolled, and twisted, trying every trick Elias had seen before. But the human anticipated, controlled, and neutralized every attack. Around them, students watched in awe, too afraid to move. But what they saw was more than strength. It was calm under pressure, strategy in action, and control over fear. Elias blocked a final strike, stepped in, and pinned the killer to the floor. His eyes were steady, his voice calm. "You're done," he said simply. "No one will get hurt now." The killer struggled but found himself unable to move. Every attack was met with control, every attempt to escape calculated and countered. For the first time he realized he could not win. You're different," the killer whispered, almost in disbelief. "I'm from Earth," Elias said softly, "where danger is everywhere and survival depends on calm, focus, and courage." Security arrived moments later, summoned by silent alarms. They took the killer into custody, and the devices meant to disrupt the Academy's systems were deactivated. The students slowly emerged from their hiding places. Some stared at Elias with awe. Some whispered stories that would be retold for years. Lyra ran to his side, feathers quivering. "You did it," she said softly. "All of them. How are you so calm?" Elias gave a small smile. "It's not about being fearless. It's about controlling fear, understanding the threat and acting with precision." Lyra nodded slowly, understanding dawning. Humans are amazing. Elias looked out at the stars visible through the Academy dome. We survive. That's all humans do. The Academy's dean called a meeting the next day. Every student, teacher, and staff member attended. Elias sat quietly at the back as usual, watching and listening. The dean spoke with pride. Today we witness courage, control, and quick thinking. One among us faced the most skilled attacker the Academy has ever seen, and kept calm under pressure. Their actions protected everyone here. Let this be a lesson. Bravery and control can overcome even the most dangerous threats. Every eye in the room turned toward Elias. For the first time, the human in the back corner received the recognition he deserved. Lyra leaned over. That's you. They mean you. Elias nodded quietly. I did what needed to be done. The applause was thunderous. Students and teachers alike cheered for him, inspired not only by his skill but by his calmness in the face of deadly danger. Later, Elias walked along the observation deck, alone this time. The stars stretched infinitely, calm and silent witnesses to the human who had stood unmoved. He thought of Earth, of DEATHWORLD, and of the countless generations who had survived impossible dangers. It was not strength alone that had kept them alive. It was focus, control, and courage. Somewhere far from the Academy, the real mastermind of the attacks may still be planning, but Elias knew he would be ready. Lyra joined him. Do you think they'll ever stop coming? He shook his head calmly. No, but we don't stop either. Humans survive because we adapt, we endure, and we face danger without panic. That's how we win. Her feathers ruffled softly in admiration. I think I understand now. You're not just strong, you're human. Elias smiled faintly. Exactly. And that's enough. In the days that followed, stories of Elias's actions spread throughout the Academy. Students called him the Deathworlder who stood unmoved. Teachers praised his courage and strategy. Even Corin, under careful guidance, began to learn from him, learning that true strength was not in fear, weapons, or speed, but in control and courage. Elias returned to his usual life, quiet, attentive, and calm. He studied his lessons, listened to his teachers, and walked among the students as though nothing had happened. But everyone knew something had changed. Humans were no longer simply rare visitors. They were beings to respect, beings who survived, and beings who could face even the deadliest threats without flinching. And Elias Ward, the quiet transfer student from Earth, had earned that respect. The Academy was safe. The students were inspired. And somewhere deep in the galaxy, the legend of a human from a death world who stood unmoved in the face of death began to grow. Because when a killer walked into class, Elias Ward did not run. He did not panic. He stood unmoved, and the galaxy would never forget it. The shuttle drifted through the black ocean of space like a silver leaf caught in a storm. Inside it sat a young cadet named Ethan Cole, 17 years old, eyes full of wonder. He had dreamed all his life of joining the Terran fleet, of flying among the stars like the heroes in old stories. But dreams had a way of turning dangerous. When the universe decided to test them, the training mission was supposed to be simple. A navigation exercise to the edge of the outer rim. Ethan and 4 other cadets were aboard the shuttle Hawk 3, supervised by a senior officer. The stars shimmered around them, endless and bright. Everything was fine until the storm came. It was not rain or wind. It was a magnetic storm, a roaring wave of charged particles that struck their ship like a fist. Lights flickered. The engines screamed. The officer shouted commands, but the console exploded in sparks. The shuttle spun wildly, alarms flashing red. Brace for impact, someone yelled. Ethan barely had time to fasten his harness before the ship plunged into darkness. The stars vanished. The gravity drive failed. Then came the blinding flash and the long, endless fall. When Ethan opened his eyes, he was lying on the ground. His head hurt and the smell of burning metal filled the air. The wreckage of the shuttle smoked nearby, half buried in green mud. He called for his crewmates, but there was only silence. The others were gone. No voices, no movement. The forest around him glowed faintly in strange colors. Trees twisted toward the sky, their bark shining like wet glass. The air was thick and warm, filled with the buzz of unseen creatures. The world was alive, but it was not welcoming. Ethan checked his survival pack. A knife, a flashlight, a few ration bars, and an emergency beacon. He tried to activate the beacon, but it blinked red. The signal transmitter was broken. That meant no one would find him easily. He was alone. He sat against a fallen tree trying to breathe. He remembered his instructor's voice. In survival, panic kills faster than hunger. So Ethan did what he had been trained to do. He focused. First, he gathered what equipment he could from the wreck. He found a water filter, a first aid kit, and a damaged laser pistol that still fired a weak beam. It wasn't much, but it was something. Then he climbed a hill to get a better view. From the top, he saw endless jungle. Strange birds glided through the mist. Far away, mountains glowed blue as if filled with light. And then he saw movement, shapes tall and fast running through the trees below. Too big to be human. Ethan froze. He remembered reading about this sector during training. It was unexplored. The Terran maps listed it only as XZ-92, a system near the border of the Krathar Dominion. The name made his stomach tighten. The Krathar were not friends. They were a proud warrior species, tall, fur-covered beings with claws and strength far beyond human limits. They respected only power and viewed most other species as weak. If this was their world, Ethan was in serious danger. That night, he built a small shelter using metal panels from the shuttle. He set traps near the camp, hoping to catch small creatures for food. The alien forest echoed with roars and calls. Sometimes he thought he saw glowing eyes watching from the dark. He couldn't sleep. Every few minutes he checked his fire and looked around with his flashlight. His hands shook, but he kept his knife close. He wasn't brave because he wasn't afraid. He was brave because he was terrified and still moved forward. In the early hours of morning, he heard something heavy step through the leaves. Then another step, and another. Whatever it was big. The ground seemed to vibrate. Ethan aimed his weak laser pistol toward the sound. A shape emerged from the mist, tall, broad-shouldered, with armor made of bone and metal. Two glowing eyes stared back at him from behind a helmet. The creature was nearly 3 meters tall. Ethan's finger trembled on the trigger. The creature tilted its head, studying him. Its voice was low and deep, full of growls. Human, it said. The word strange and broken, but clear enough. Ethan didn't move. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. The alien took one step closer. It was covered in scars, its armor marked with claw symbols. A long spear rested in its hand, tipped with glowing blue metal. It could have killed him in a single blow. Instead, it stopped and sniffed the air, almost like an animal testing a new scent. Then it spoke again. "You bleed," it said, pointing at Ethan's arm. Ethan looked down. A cut from the crash was still bleeding. He pressed a cloth over it. "Yeah," he muttered. "I'm fine." The alien grunted and turned its head slightly as if listening to something far away. Then just as suddenly as it had appeared, it walked back into the mist, leaving Ethan alone. He didn't understand. If it wanted to kill him, it could have. Why did it spare him? The next day, Ethan followed a river to find clean water. He built a small raft using wreckage pieces, floating downstream quietly. He had the strange feeling that someone was watching again. Sometimes he caught flashes of movement in the trees, a shadow, a reflection of armor, the glint of a spear. When night came, he stopped by a waterfall. He set his traps again and sat by the fire, roasting a small lizard-like creature he had caught. It tasted awful, but it kept him alive. Suddenly, the jungle went silent. Even the insects stopped chirping. Ethan's instincts screamed. Something was coming. From the dark bushes burst a creature unlike anything he had seen. 6 legs, a mouth full of fangs, and skin like black stone. It charged straight at him. Ethan fired his weak laser pistol, but the beam only burned the surface of the creature's skin. He grabbed a metal rod and struck it as hard as he could, dodging claws that slashed through his sleeve. The creature roared and threw him against a rock, his vision blurred. He could barely stand, but he refused to give up. He threw a burning log at the beast's face, blinding it for a moment, then drove his knife into its neck. The knife broke, but the creature stumbled. Just as it lunged again, a spear flew from the trees and struck through its chest. The monster fell, dead. Ethan looked up. The alien warrior stood there again. Its armor was marked with symbols of lightning. This was no ordinary soldier. It was a Hunter Alpha, the highest rank among the Krathar. The alien stepped closer, pulling its spear free from the beast. It looked down at Ethan, breathing heavily but still standing despite his injuries. "You fight," the alien said slowly. "Small, but fight," Ethan didn't know what to say. I had to, he whispered. The alien crouched, studying him. Then it tapped its chest and said, Vakor. Ethan pointed at himself. Ethan. Vakor repeated the name, the sound awkward but respectful. Then he nodded once in a warrior's gesture of approval and turned to leave. Ethan called out, Wait. Why did you help me? Vakor looked back over his shoulder. His deep voice rumbled through the clearing. Because you did not run. Then he vanished into the forest again, silent as a shadow. That night Ethan sat by the fire, staring at the spear mark still glowing on the dead creature's body. He realized something had changed. The alien could have let him die, but it didn't. It had saved him, not out of pity, but because it had seen something in him worth saving. For the first time since the crash, Ethan didn't feel entirely alone. He looked up at the alien stars above and whispered, Thank you, Vakor. Far away, hidden among the trees, the Krathar Alpha watched him quietly, curious about the fragile being who refused to surrender to fear. In the silence of the alien night, a strange bond began, one that would one day shake the galaxy. The morning sun rose through the thick green mist of the alien jungle. Light broke across the leaves, turning them gold. Ethan Cole woke to the sound of strange birds calling in the distance. His body still ached from the fight with the creature last night, but he was alive. He sat near the dying fire, watching the smoke rise into the air. The world around him looked peaceful, yet he knew danger waited behind every shadow. He thought about the tall alien warrior who had saved him, Vakor. Ethan still couldn't understand why a Krathar Alpha would help a human. Everything he had learned at the Terran Academy said the Krathar were fierce, proud hunters who respected only strength. Maybe saving him had been part of some strange test. Or maybe, for reasons he couldn't guess, the alien had simply decided not to kill him. Either way, Ethan knew one thing. He had to keep moving. He checked the small survival pack and made sure his tools were still working. Then he walked deeper into the jungle, following the river. The air smelled of wet earth and metallic flowers. The sounds of unseen animals echoed through the trees. After an hour of walking, he noticed something strange. Large footprints pressed into the mud beside the riverbank. They were too big to belong to any animal he had seen. The claw marks were deep and sharp. Ethan crouched beside them, touching the edge of one print. It was still fresh. He looked around quickly. The forest seemed quiet, but he felt eyes on him. He tightened his grip on the broken laser pistol. I know you're out there, he said softly. No one answered. But when he turned his head, he caught a glimpse of movement, a tall shadow slipping between the trees. Vakor? He whispered. The shadow didn't reply. It simply watched him. Then, after a moment, it was gone. That night, Ethan built another small camp. He had learned how to make the alien wood burn slowly without too much smoke. He roasted a few fruits he had found and listened to the forest. The loneliness pressed on him. He missed Earth, the blue sky, his mother's cooking, the noise of city streets. But most of all, he missed hearing human voices. Here, the only voice he had heard in days was a deep, growling alien one. He wondered if Vakor was still nearby. The thought gave him strange comfort. As he was about to rest, the ground trembled again, soft, heavy steps moving closer. Ethan stood quickly, knife in hand. But this time the sound was slower, steady, not like a wild animal's rush, from behind a wall of vines. The tall figure appeared, Vakor. His armor shimmered faintly in the firelight, the edges scratched from battles long past. His glowing eyes studied Ethan carefully. Neither spoke for several seconds. The only sound was the crackle of fire. Finally, Ethan said quietly, "You followed me." Vakor gave a low rumble that almost sounded like amusement. "I watch. You live." "Trying to," Ethan replied, sitting down again. "You didn't have to help me last night." Vakor stepped closer, his shadow falling across the boy. "Prey that fights deserves life," Ethan frowned. "Prey? I'm not prey." The alien tilted his head. "All who are weak are prey. But you..." He paused, searching for words. "You fight like Hunter." Ethan smiled slightly. "Thanks, I guess." Vakor sat across from him, folding his legs. For a moment, the jungle seemed to hold its breath. The two different beings, one young human, one ancient warrior, sat quietly beside the same fire. Ethan tried to talk. "You're Krathar, right? The alpha kind?" Vakor nodded once. Vakor, son of Arthul, hunter of the Great Trial. Ethan didn't understand all the words, but the meaning was clear. Vakor was no ordinary warrior. He was taking part in a test, a kind of sacred hunt. What is this Great Trial? Ethan asked. Vakor looked toward the stars. To become Alpha, one must hunt alone, face the wild, prove worth. Ethan realized something. Vakor was doing this alone too, just like him. Two survivors from different worlds, both trapped by fate. He asked, "And me, what do I have to do to survive your planet?" Vakor looked at him with interest. "You learn? You adapt. That is strength." Days passed. The strange friendship between human and alien slowly grew. Vakor didn't speak much, but he taught Ethan how to read the tracks of animals, how to tell which fruits were safe, and how to hide his scent from predators. In return, Ethan showed Vakor something new, human tools and ideas. He built a small slingshot using metal wires and tree branches. When he demonstrated how it worked, Vakor laughed, a deep sound like thunder. "Small weapon," he said. "But clever," Ethan grinned. "Sometimes clever wins over strong." Vakor looked at him thoughtfully. "Maybe." They began to move together through the jungle, the boy scanning for signs of food, the Alpha guarding from the front. Slowly, a bond of trust formed between them, yet danger was never far. One afternoon, they came across a large open field filled with tall red grass. Ethan wanted to cross, but Vakor raised his hand. "No," he warned. "Hunt ground." Before Ethan could ask what he meant, the ground shook. Huge winged beasts rose from the grass, roaring loudly. Their skins shimmered like glass, reflecting sunlight. They had sharp tails that could pierce metal. Vakor threw a spear at the nearest one, striking it through the wing. The beast screamed and fell. Another rushed from behind, and Ethan ducked under its swing, rolling across the ground. He grabbed a flare from his pack and fired it upward. The red light exploded in the air, startling the beasts. For a moment, they turned away in confusion. "Now," Ethan shouted. Vakor charged, striking down another beast. Together they fought side by side, alien strength and human agility working as one. When the last beast fell, the ground was covered in dust and feathers. Ethan panted, wiping sweat from his face. "That was close." Vakor nodded, his chest heaving. He looked at the boy and said, "You fight like Hunter." Ethan laughed weakly. "Guess I'm learning." Vakor placed his large hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You learn fast, you not prey." Ethan looked up, surprised. "Then what am I?" Vakor thought for a long time. Finally, he spoke a single word. "Brothar." Ethan blinked. "Brother?" Vakor nodded slowly. "In our tongue, means one who stands beside, not behind." Ethan smiled, a real wide smile that reached his eyes. "Then I'm honored, Vakor." The Alpha gave a proud nod. "Brothar." That night they shared food by the fire. The stars were bright above the canopy. Ethan listened as Vakor told stories of his people, of their homeworld, where great storms shaped mountains and hunters trained under twin suns. He spoke of honor, courage, and strength. In return, Ethan told him about Earth, about blue oceans, tall cities, and quiet places filled with music. Vakor listened silently, as if trying to imagine it all. When Ethan finished, Vakor said, "Your world." "Sounds soft," Ethan laughed. "Maybe, but humans can fight too when we have to." Vakor looked at him seriously. "I see, you have fire inside." Ethan met his glowing eyes. "Maybe that's what makes us human." Over the next few days, they hunted together, traveled together, and even laughed sometimes. The jungle no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a challenge, a test they were both determined to overcome. But their peace would not last. Far away, high in the clouds, lights flickered. Not stars, but ships. The sky thundered as engines roared. Ethan looked up and saw small dots moving fast across the heavens. "What is that?" he whispered. Vakor's expression hardened. "Warships. Not mine." A cold fear ran through Ethan. "Then whose?" The Alpha raised his spear and stared toward the horizon. "Drovari," he said grimly. "Machines. They come to kill." Ethan's heart sank. "We have to warn someone." Vakor looked down at him. "We will fight," Ethan nodded. "Together?" Vakor gave a slow smile. "Together, Brothar." The ground shook again as the first explosions echoed through the forest. Fires rose in the distance, painting the sky red, and so began the war that would test their bond. The war that would make a human boy and an alien hunter stand as brothers against an empire of steel. The jungle that had once been quiet now trembled with the sound of engines in the sky. The morning light glowed red through the mist, and strange black smoke drifted down like falling shadows. Ethan Cole stood beside Vakor, staring up at the burning clouds. "Dravari," Vakor said again, his deep voice heavy with warning. Ethan swallowed hard. "The same ones you fought before?" The Alpha nodded. "Yes, machine race. No heart, no mercy. They take life, turn it into metal." Ethan's stomach tightened. He remembered hearing stories about the Dravari at the Terran Academy, mechanical beings that moved like insects, spreading across planets and enslaving other species. He had never seen one, but now, high above the trees, their ships were descending. Vakor turned away from the sky. "We must move, now." Ethan nodded quickly and grabbed his pack. Together they ran through the thick jungle, moving silently between the glowing trees. Every now and then a loud explosion shook the ground and clouds of ash fell through the branches. "What do they want with this planet?" Ethan asked as they ran. Vakor's eyes glowed with anger. "This is sacred ground, my trial world, but Dravari see no meaning. They only take." They reached a ridge that overlooked a wide valley. Below, Ethan saw giant metal ships landing. Hundreds of small spider-like drones crawled out, spreading across the forest floor. Their red eyes glowed as they scanned everything. Trees, animals, and even stones that were burned or broken down into dust. Ethan's voice trembled. "They're destroying everything." Vakor gripped his spear tightly. "They will not destroy us." By evening, the two found an old Krathar outpost half buried under vines. It was small, built of black stone and metal with symbols carved on the walls. Inside, broken weapons and ancient armor lay scattered across the floor. Vakor lit a fire and knelt beside it, sharpening his blade. Ethan explored the room.
"Can't we call your people for help?"
Vakor shook his head. "No signal. Dravari blocked the skies. We fight alone." Ethan looked at him quietly. "Then we'll fight smart." Vakor raised his head. "Smart?" Ethan smiled a little. "Yeah, humans aren't the strongest, but we're clever." Vakor tilted his head, interested. "You have plan?" "Maybe," Ethan said, kneeling to draw shapes in the dust. He used small stones to mark the trees and a big one for the Dravari ship. Their drones move in patterns. "If we hit them here near the river, we can make them think the enemy is bigger than it is." Vakor watched carefully as Ethan continued. "We can build traps, tripwires, flame bursts using your fuel pods, and noise decoys to confuse them." The Alpha looked impressed. "You fight like Hunter, but think like War Chief," Ethan grinned. "I'll take that as a compliment." That night, under the alien stars, they worked together. Two different beings, one mind. They gathered metal scraps from the outpost, tied ropes from alien vines, and used energy cells to power small traps. Ethan built a simple explosive using the power core of his broken beacon. It wasn't much, but it would burn hot enough to destroy a few machines. Vakor tested the traps himself, roaring with satisfaction when one snapped shut perfectly. Before resting, Vakor spoke quietly. "Many hunters would laugh at me, fighting beside human boy." Ethan looked up from the fire. "And what would you tell them?" Vakor's eyes glowed softly. "I would tell them the boy is my brother." Ethan smiled. "Then I'd say the same, big guy." The next morning, the war truly began. The first Dravari patrol entered the valley. 5 mechanical drones moving on 6 legs, their bodies silver and shining. Their red eyes scanned every direction. When one stepped on a vine wire, it triggered a blast of heat. The explosion sent 2 drones flying into the air. Ethan and Vakor attacked from the shadows. Ethan threw a small flare that blinded the machine's sensors, while Vakor leaped forward, his spear cutting through metal like lightning. The jungle filled with the sound of sparks and fire. "Left side," Ethan shouted, firing his laser pistol. The weak beam struck one drone's eye, distracting it long enough for Vakor to crush it with a single blow. When the smoke cleared, only silence remained. Pieces of metal lay scattered around them. Ethan's hands were shaking, but he was smiling. "It worked." Vakor grinned. "Human trap. Very good, but the victory was short-lived." From above, a deep rumbling sound echoed. A larger Dravari transport was descending. Hundreds of drones dropped from the sky, landing in waves. Ethan's heart pounded. "There's too many." Vakor looked at him calmly. "Then we make them pay for every step." They retreated deeper into the forest, setting off trap after trap. Explosions lit up the trees. Smoke rose high into the sky. Ethan ran beside Vakor, firing and throwing anything he could use. The machines moved endlessly, their red eyes glowing through the smoke. Ethan tripped over a rock and fell hard. A drone leapt toward him. Before it could strike, Vakor appeared, taking the blow on his armor and smashing the machine's head with his fist. "You fall again, small one," he said, half teasing. Ethan laughed breathlessly. "I'm working on it." But soon they were surrounded. The drones closed in from all sides. There were too many. Ethan's weapon overheated and Vakor's spear broke from repeated strikes. A giant Dravari enforcer dropped from the ship, taller than even Vakor, covered in thick armor. It spoke in a metallic voice. "Surrender. Life form analysis complete. Organics will be processed." Vakor stepped forward unafraid. "Come and take me, machine." He charged with a roar, tackling the enforcer. The ground shook as they fought, claws against metal, fire against strength. Ethan saw Vakor's armor crack, sparks flying as the machine hit him hard. "Vakor!" Ethan shouted. Ignoring his fear, Ethan grabbed one of the traps and the beacon core bomb and ran forward. He threw it under the enforcer's feet and shouted, "Now!" Vakor slammed his fist into the ground, triggering the device. A bright flash exploded and the enforcer fell backward, its chest burning. The blast threw both of them down and everything went white. When Ethan opened his eyes, the world was quiet again. His ears rang and smoke drifted through the trees. He coughed and looked around. The drones were gone, destroyed or retreated. But Vakor was lying still near a fallen tree. Ethan crawled to him quickly. "Vakor, hey, come on, don't do this to me." The Alpha's breathing was heavy. His armor was torn and his shoulder burned with sparks. Still, he smiled weakly. "You fight. Well, Brothar?" "Don't talk," Ethan said, pressing a bandage against the wound. "You're going to be fine," Vakor grunted. "Machines, take prisoners. They will come back." Ethan looked up, realizing the truth. More ships were landing in the distance. If the Dravari returned, they'd both be captured. "I'll get you out of here," Ethan said firmly. But before he could move, the air filled with a loud hum. Beams of red light swept across the forest. A huge machine ship appeared overhead, lowering metal claws that grabbed Vakor. "No!" Ethan shouted, trying to hold on. But the claws lifted the alien off the ground. Vakor reached toward him, shouting something in his own language before being pulled into the ship. Ethan was thrown back by the force of the engines as the ship rose into the sky. He could only watch helplessly as his friend, his brother, was taken. The forest went silent again. Ethan dropped to his knees, breathing hard. His body ached, his hands were dirty, and tears stung his eyes. He looked up at the sky where the ship had disappeared. "I'll find you," he whispered. "I swear I'll bring you back." For a long time he sat there, the jungle slowly calming around him. The fires faded and the stars began to shine again. Somewhere far above, his brother was in the hands of monsters. But Ethan wasn't a scared cadet anymore, he was a survivor, a fighter, a hunter in his own right. He picked up Vakor's broken spear, holding it tight in his hands. "You saved me," he said quietly. "Now it's my turn." As he walked into the shadows of the jungle, the night wind carried his words into the distance. The stars burned brighter as if listening. The boy from Earth had made a promise, and the galaxy would soon learn what it meant when a human refused to give up. The sky above the alien jungle was dark, lit only by the faint glow of distant stars. Smoke still drifted from the battle below. Ethan Cole stood alone, gripping Vakor's broken spear tightly in his hands. His heart pounded. The Dravari had taken his brother, his friend, his mentor, the Alpha who had named him Brothar. Ethan's mind raced. He had survived the jungle, fought drones, and seen more than any 17-year-old should. But now Vakor was gone, and Ethan could not allow him to remain in enemy hands. He remembered the lessons the Alpha had taught him: patience, observation, and courage. Now all of those lessons had a single purpose: rescue Vakor. Ethan moved through the forest carefully, avoiding patrols of Dravari drones that scouted for him. He had scavenged pieces of broken machines from the battlefield and built simple tools: a small grappling hook, a flare launcher, and a slingshot to distract enemies. His human ingenuity was all he had against the Dravari Empire. As he approached a cliff overlooking the Dravari ship, Ethan crouched behind a jagged rock. The warship was enormous. taller than the highest tree in the jungle, covered with spiked armor and glowing red lights. Shafts of red energy scanned the ground below. Inside, he knew Vakor was held in some metal cell. Ethan's stomach twisted. He had never snuck onto a ship before, let alone a Dravari warship. But fear was gone. All that remained was determination. He whispered to himself, gripping the spear. "I'm not leaving you." Under cover of darkness, Ethan climbed a series of vines and cables that hung from the ship's landing gear. The metal was slick with oil, but he managed to pull himself up carefully. The ship's surface was patrolled by small Dravari drones. Their red sensors swept across the hull. Ethan froze when one came close. He held his breath, waiting. The drone paused for a second, then drifted away. Small victories like this kept him going. Reaching a vent near the side of the ship, Ethan pried it open with a metal bar. The interior was dark, filled with the hum of machinery. Heat radiated from the walls and sparks flew from exposed wires. He dropped inside silently, landing on a grated floor. The ship's corridors stretched endlessly, metal walls glowing faintly with red light. Ethan crawled along the floor, listening to the whir of patrol drones and the muffled clank of robotic footsteps. He used every trick he had learned from Vakor, staying in shadows, moving slowly, and observing patterns. After what felt like hours, he saw a large cell ahead. Inside, bound by energy restraints, was Vakor. The Alpha's armor was damaged and he was breathing heavily. Yet, his glowing eyes flickered when he saw Ethan. "Brothar," Vakor whispered. Ethan's chest tightened. "I'm getting you out." "Hold on." He studied the control panel outside the cell. Complex symbols blinked in patterns he did not fully understand. But with careful observation, he realized the restraint could be disabled by reversing the energy flow. Ethan grabbed a broken cable and attached it to the nearest power conduit. Sparks flew and the lights flickered. Vakor tensed.
Careful.
Ethan bit his lip and worked quickly. The system beeped, warning of overload. Sweat ran down his face. "Almost done." With a final pull, the energy restraints deactivated. Vakor's arms were free. He rubbed them, then looked at Ethan. "You risked much for me." Ethan shook his head. "You saved me first. Now it's my turn." Just as they were about to move, alarms blared. The ship shook as Dravari reinforcements arrived. Red lights flashed and automated guns swiveled toward them. Vakor growled, grabbing Ethan's shoulder. "Listen to me. We fight together." Ethan nodded, raising the broken spear. The corridors echoed with the sound of their footsteps as they ran, leaping over cables and rolling under barriers. Drones attacked, but Ethan used his small explosives and flares to distract them, while Vakor smashed the machines with his bare hands. The Alpha roared, a sound that shook the metal walls. Every swing of his spear, every punch destroyed another Dravari attacker. Ethan's heart raced as he realized something incredible. His human tricks, combined with Vakor's strength, were unstoppable. They reached a large cargo hold filled with cages. Ethan's eyes widened. Inside, alien creatures of all shapes and sizes were trapped, some mechanical, some biological. Many were frightened, huddled together. Vakor's roar echoed through the room. "No one left behind." Ethan nodded. Using small explosives, he freed the cage's locks. The creatures hesitated, then followed them. The hall was alive with movement. Humans, aliens, Krathar, and strange beasts running together under Ethan and Vakor's protection. But the ship was far from safe. A massive Dravari enforcer stepped into the corridor, blocking their exit. Its red eyes glowed and the metal body gleamed like polished stone. Vakor stepped forward. "You will not stop us." Ethan stood beside him. "We fight together." The enforcer raised its arms. Energy beams shot out. Vakor deflected them with his broken spear. Ethan fired his small laser pistol, aiming for its joints and weak points. The creatures they freed attacked too, biting and clawing at the machine's legs. The battle was fierce, sparks and fire filling the air. Vakor leaped onto the enforcer's shoulder, smashing the metal with his fists. Ethan swung a metal pipe at its legs, tripping it. With a coordinated effort, they brought the massive machine down, its systems smoking and broken. Ethan collapsed against the wall, breathing hard. Vakor leaned on him. "Human, you are strong," he said. Ethan smiled weakly. "Not just me, us together." Vakor nodded. "Together, Brothar." They ran toward the escape pods. The ship groaned as explosions from earlier fights shook the hull. Ethan hacked the launch panel with quick, precise movements, remembering every trick he had learned in the jungle and on the battlefield. The pod doors opened. Vakor stepped inside first, then helped Ethan climb in. Around them, chaos erupted and alarms, sparks, and fire. But the pod launched successfully, shooting into the sky with a burst of energy. As they escaped the Dravari ship, Ethan looked back. Flames and explosions lit the night sky. The ship burned, but Ethan knew this was only one battle in a much larger war. Vakor, seated beside him, placed a hand on his shoulder. "You risked everything," he said quietly. "You are no longer just a human boy. You are hunter, warrior, brother." Ethan felt warmth fill him. "And you're my brother too," he said, gripping Vakor's hand. The pod drifted through space, carrying two friends from different worlds, a human and a Krathar Alpha, who had survived impossible odds and now shared a bond stronger than any battle. Outside, the stars shone brightly. Somewhere below, the jungle still smoked, but above, two figures sat together in silence, knowing they had changed each other's lives forever. Ethan whispered to himself, almost as a promise, "We'll fight every battle together. Vakor, no one will ever take you from me again." Vakor's glowing eyes met his. "We fight together. Always, Brothar." And so in the cold expanse of space, a human and an alien Alpha became a single force, a living legend in the making, their bond unbreakable. The Dravari would return. The galaxy would see new wars, but for Ethan and Vakor, no enemy would ever break their promise. The boy from Earth and the Krathar Alpha were brothers now, and together they were unstoppable.